Wrist wraps and wrist straps. Should you use them? What's the difference? What are the benefits and what are the cons? So wrist wraps and wrist straps, these can be very helpful when you're trying to maximize your power output, maximize how much you are lifting when you are in the gym. Wrist wraps, you're gonna wrap them around your wrist, and they are there as a way for you to help just stabilize your wrist joint when you are lifting weights. Whereas in comparison, lift straps, even though they're still gonna go around your wrist, these are gonna be a helpful tool to tie your hands to a given weight, whether that be a dumbbell or a barbell, so you can actually lift heavier. So now that we know the difference between wrist wraps and wrist straps, let's just talk about the pros and cons of them. So the biggest thing that is helpful with wrist wraps is it helps prevent hyperextension of your wrists. Often, a lot of people, when they're doing pressing movements, you'll notice that they lose stability in their wrists, and it can cause a lot of wrist pain when one is trying to push a given weight. Another pro when it comes to wrist wraps is it does help mitigate wrist pain, it promotes proper wrist placement, and it reduces any energy leakage if the wrist deviates during a given movement. So obviously, bench press is the most popular exercise that you will typically see people using wrist wraps. That's typically when I use them. I also use them when I'm doing shoulder press as well too. So whether that be when I'm using dumbbells or a barbell for shoulder press or chest press, wrist straps, especially for me, like I have tiny little wrists here, you know, making sure that my wrists aren't deviating when I'm lifting a significant amount of weight relative to me is very important to ensure that I'm still maximizing how much I'm lifting in a safe-free manner. All right, so there's a lot of benefits, obviously, when it comes to wrist wraps. When it comes to putting them on, this is the biggest thing. People actually tend to put them on incorrectly. So I have the SBD brand. I have had these bad boys. Can you see it there? SBD. I have had these bad boys since I first got into powerlifting. I'm not a powerlifter anymore, but it was in 2016, and the Velcro on these things are still friggin' amazing. So really amazing brand. Another reason why I like this brand is because of how long they are. A lot of wrist wraps are pretty short, and I like to wrap it around my wrist a couple of times just to give it that extra support. So the biggest mistake that I see, people will wrap this around their wrist too low. They'll actually wrap it around their wrist. I get it, the name of it seems intuitive that that's where you would wrap it, but you actually want it to start a lot higher. So I take it around my thumb like this, and I'll start to have it around my hand. So you can see that this is where my wrist joint is, right? So I have it like maybe halfway up, and it's gonna go around my hand. And I grab it and twist it around really, really tight, making sure that my grip feels okay and I'm not like losing any circulation or anything like that. But I'll twist it around like that, twist it around again, making sure that it's pretty tight, and I'll go all the way around. See how many times I'm wrapping that around and making sure that it is super high on my wrist. So when I do that, like it's actually, I know I wrapped it pretty tight, but it's still pretty good. I still make sure that I have some mobility, some movement in there. So I do that on both sides. So again, around the thumb, halfway up the hand, we're gonna pull really tight, loop it again and again, all the way around. And look at that, like there's no way that my wrists are gonna deviate during any type of pressing movements. It's also very helpful to have wrist wraps when you're doing squats as well, just ensuring that you have that increased level of stability so that way you can really grasp and hold that barbell on your back. So that's what you want it to look like. This is what I tend to see. People will have their wrist wraps like this, and it'll be around their actual wrist. Like this, like look how low that is. And then I still can get a lot of deviation there, even if I do it up a lot tighter, right? Like it's pretty loose, so you can see. So let's do it up super tight around the wrist. Obviously it's gonna be a little bit tighter as that starting point, but if we bring it down around the actual wrist, do it really tight, similar to what I already previously showed you of the proper way to do it. and it's not up on my hand. It looks like it is there because that's where it loops onto the thumb. But you can see it's not up on the hand. Look at that deviation. In comparison, again, all the way up on the hand, all the way around. Yeah, a little bit down there, but my wrist is pretty stable. As you can see, the deviation has been mitigated quite significantly. So make sure that it's up there and it's up really tight. If you can keep your wrist wraps on your hand in between your sets and you're resting, this isn't tight enough. Whenever I am done a given set, I always will take it off like this, loosen it up like this, and give my wrists a bit of a break. So making sure, again, you don't want it to be too tight where you're cutting off circulation, so you kind of have to play with it when you are determining how tight it is for you. But you do want to make sure that it is tight enough so you're not getting any type of wrist deviation. So like I said, the most common exercise that you're going to use your wrist wraps for is bench press. You'll also see people doing it for dumbbell shoulder press, barbell shoulder press. People will use wrist wraps for back squats as well. So I'm going to show you guys what it's going to look like with the wrist wraps super tight, the way that I demonstrated for you, and how things typically might look if you're not wearing them and doing them up tight enough, you're not wearing them correctly. So this is done the proper way. Look, it's up like towards my hand, super tight right now. I'll typically like kind of wiggle my wrists like this, give my hands a little bit of a squeeze to make sure I still have some good circulation. All right, so pay attention to my wrists here. The biggest goal when we're doing bench press is to make sure that our wrists stay up like this throughout the entire range of motion. So when we get into place, the wrist wraps are going to allow my wrists to stay into place, so that way we aren't seeing any deviation. So that keeps my wrists nice and strong. I have no wrist pain when I'm wearing them, and it allows me to just maximize how much weight I'm going to have on the bar. Now, say the wrist wraps are a lot lower, they're not as tight, and they're being worn in the incorrect way. You might as well not even wear them at all because you're not really getting the benefits that you want to be getting if you're not using them correctly. So they're a lot lower on the wrists. They're not super tight. Wrists are nice and flimsy. How is our bench press gonna look if we aren't paying attention to our proper wrist placement? So obviously the goal is to always make sure that our wrists aren't deviating, they're not hyperextending. But when you have a lot of weight on the bar, our bodies tend to compensate at times. And that's where energy leakage comes into play, where you'll see that sometimes people's wrists will deviate backwards. So even naturally, you can see I'm already grabbing the barbell where my wrists are bending backwards like that. If you're a new lifter and you don't know to do that, or say, like I said, you know to do it, you keep your wrists nice and correct in the proper placement at first. But say there's a lot of weight on the bar and you come down and your wrists start to curl back like that, and you don't even realize it, and your wrists are still curling back because you're just focused on getting that barbell off of your chest, and you're not even paying attention to the improper placement of your wrists. You're not paying attention to how much your wrists have deviated. And of course, the wrist wraps aren't doing their job because they're not in the proper place. What about wrist straps? Why are those considered to be beneficial? Well, the biggest thing is, like I said, they allow you to actually tie your hands to a given weight. So if you're using a dumbbell or a barbell, for example, and when you tie your hands to that weight, that's gonna allow you to lift heavier. If you're gonna be able to lift heavier, you're gonna maximize the amount of volume that you're doing, which is gonna allow you to ultimately, in time, build more muscle. Now, there is a lot of concerns that people have with using wrist straps, and the argument is that people think that it's gonna reduce your grip strength. And for me personally, you always wanna ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? My biggest goal is to maximize muscle growth. So if doing a Romanian deadlift, for example, if I'm not using my wrist straps, maybe I'm only able to hold 30-pound dumbbells before I actually fail. And that failure isn't due to muscular fatigue, it's due to my grip strength failing. But if I used wrist straps, maybe I'm able to hold 50-pound dumbbells. That's a significant jump where my failure actually occurs when muscular fatigue sets in versus my grip strength being the limiting factor. Me as a bodybuilder, when I'm trying to focus on maximizing muscle growth, I'm gonna opt for using wrist straps. I'm not a powerlifter where my goal is to focus on grip strength when I'm doing a given exercise like the deadlift, for example. My goal is not to focus on how long I can hold a dumbbell. My goal is to maximize muscle growth. And you don't have to be a bodybuilder in order for that to be the same goal that you have. Maybe you're trying to lose body fat, you're trying to change your body composition. Your ultimate underlying goal should be to maximize muscle growth, because as we know, the more muscle that you have on your frame, the more calories you're going to end up burning. So I would argue that for most people, the goal in the gym, unless you're more sports specific where you are a powerlifter, for example, the biggest goal is to focus on maximizing muscle growth, and using wrist straps can be a very helpful tool to allow you to do that. Now, that's always been my argument. What's really exciting is that there actually has been a study that recently has come out that showcases that your grip strength actually doesn't go down when you are using wrist straps. Yes, of course, the fatigue that you experience isn't going to settle in as quickly as it would if you weren't using wrist straps, but you still experience grip fatigue, which is an indicator that you're still utilizing grip strength. The biggest thing that you want to avoid is using these as a crutch. Now, a lot of people, and I've done this in the past, they get sloppy and lazy with their grip. So they rely on this too much as a crutch. So a lot of people, they'll actually utilize a false grip, and that's where their thumb isn't around the weight anymore, isn't around the dumbbell or the barbell anymore, and they're relying 100% on the wrist straps to enforce the grip. That's what we want to avoid. You still want to try to ensure that you're having an adequate grip, you're actually putting your thumb around the barbell and utilizing your grip, so that way you can still prioritize overall grip strength as a byproduct of you lifting. So that's the biggest thing that people want to avoid when they're utilizing wrist straps, but it doesn't actually reduce your grip strength. So I definitely recommend lifting straps. They make a huge difference, and I utilize it for most of my pull movements. So those are going to be things like barbell Romanian deadlifts, stiff-legged deadlifts, dumbbell Romanian deadlifts, back-related exercises like lat pull-downs, close grip rows, dumbbell rows, anything that utilizes a pulling movement where I notice that when my grip starts to give out before muscular fatigue sets in, that's my indicator like, hey, it's time to use my lifting straps. When you're actually putting your wrist straps on, a lot of people struggle with knowing how to do it. So you just want to put it on one side where you're going to have it go across your palm like this, and then you're going to be able to grab it with your thumb. So that's what you do with the one hand. And this is obviously worn in quite a bit, so they naturally like curl where they need to go. A lot of them new, they'll be like straight up like this. So eventually it'll get easier to use as you use them more in time. So again, I'm going to put it on my wrist like this, and then I just grab it with my thumb like this, and I pull super tight. So this is my starting position of how I utilize my wrist straps. So when you go to grab the dumbbell, you'll probably want to use one hand at a time. These are worked in enough that I can do it with both at the same time. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Is I'll loop it under like this, and like how you would normally go to grab the weight is what you want to do. And then you kind of want to twist and curl it all the way around. So I'll pull it super tight once it goes around like this, and then I'm going to twist it. So you're going to pull it under like this, and you're just going to twist it all the way around, and then you're going to tighten your grip and twist it all the way around like that. So that's what you want to do when you're trying to grab onto the dumbbell. Now you'll notice that when I'm grabbing it, my thumb is all the way around the dumbbell. So that's what you want to make sure that you do, because like a lot of people, they'll put their thumbs the other way, and that right there is a false grip where their thumb isn't wrapped around to secure that grip into place. So instead of doing this, like obviously I'm utilizing my straps. Like my straps are doing 100% of the work. I'm like not even having to barely grip. Look at my fingers like roll out. That's how much these things like help. Like the wrist straps are doing everything right now. So of course your grip strength is going to go down if that's how you're holding the weight. You want to make sure that you grab it. You still grab it really, really tight. Don't have your thumb back here like this. Don't have your wrists relaxed like this. Make sure you're still grabbing it super tight. Grab the weight properly like the wrist straps aren't there, but they make a huge difference to allow you to really hold an insane amount of weight in comparison to when it's just your wrists. And I got tiny little wrists. I'm a tiny little woman. I want some support. I want the ability to still be able to lift heavier. These bad boys right here. When you have it to do it just one hand at a time, you're gonna take the wrist wrap, pull it super tight so it's around your wrist like this. You're gonna have your hand in the place like you would when you go and grab the dumbbell. So if you're not using the wrist wrap, this is the position of where your hand is gonna be. So you wanna make sure that this is in the same position. So that's your starting point. Get your hand in position, and then you're gonna loop the wrist wrap around, and then you're gonna twist and curl it underneath, and then you're gonna go and grab it. And then see how there's like a little bit of looseness right here? You're just gonna twist it and keep twisting it and pull it tighter. And there you go. It's nice and tight now. So when you're ready to go and do the other side, it can be a little tricky when it's your first time and the wrist wraps aren't looped the way you want it to. But grab this really tight. Make sure it is super tight on your wrist. So really grab it like that. Then again, get your hand into position where you're gonna grab the dumbbell forward like this. That's how your wrist is gonna be. So you're gonna bring the strap underneath. Really try to keep the strap just nice and close to you so that way it stays tight around your wrist. So grab your thumb to pull it up, and then you're gonna push it around the dumbbell, and your thumb is gonna keep pushing it all the way around until it wraps all the way around. Once it's wrapped, it still feels pretty loose. So again, once it's wrapped all the way around, just keep twisting. Twist it, and now it's nice and secure in place. So maybe you wanna see it from that angle. So we'll pretend like we're doing it with one hand again. This hand's already looped in. So we know we're gonna grab the dumbbell with our wrist facing forward. The wrist strap is nice and tight around my wrist. We're gonna bring our palm down and really hold onto the strap. So keep your palm down, and then you're gonna utilize your fingers, keep your wrist in position, utilize your fingers to bring the strap all the way around, twist it with your thumb like that, twist it all the way around, and then you're gonna keep twisting and grab it like that. Okay, I know I totally forgot to tell you guys what lifting straps I use. This is why I would never be a good influencer, and that's why I'm not an influencer. My lifting straps that I use, I've been using these bad boys for years. WSF Grip Tech. I get these off of Amazon. You can get these like at most supplement stores. They do have them available. SBD has their own website for the lifting wraps, but for my lifting straps, these are my bad boys that I've been using for years. I will rebuy them whenever they need to be replaced. The World Standard Fitness, so worldstandardfitness.com. I always get them on Amazon. If you type in WSF lifting straps, they're like 20 bucks off of Amazon. And the reason why I like these more than the standard lifting straps that you will get at most supplement stores or any other brand off Amazon or whatever is because there is this nice material on the side where you go to hold the dumbbell. So it's a little bit glossy, but the other side is more Velcro material. Most lifting straps, this Velcro material will be on both sides, but this side right here has such a nice finish that it just increases my ability to hold onto it, because that's where my hand is holding onto it, is this material right here. I don't even know what it's called, but it does just improve the overall comfortability of actually holding onto it versus the Velcro side, which isn't always that comfortable. All right, that is officially it. Comment any questions down below. See you, team.